We'll give it another 1 or 2 more minutes before we get started. And if any of you have not registered or, excuse me, my goodness, or want to send the link to those who have not registered, we are live on YouTube, so we're streaming as well. Our registration is officially closed though. All right, it's 12:02. I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome and good morning, everybody. My name is Maddie, and I am a marketing specialist here at O3. Thanks for joining today's conversation on creating inclusive experiences in an unprecedented age of AI. Before we dive in here, I want to take a moment to say Happy National Disability Awareness Month. O3 is celebrating with a month long of events and thought leadership, bringing awareness and education to creating inclusive experiences. O3 is especially honored to be joined by accessibility experts from Tamin, a company who aligns with our values and understands the importance of accessibility. Creating unforgettable experiences at every interaction is a core value at O3, and this extends to all individuals regardless of their abilities. We're here to learn and share ideas and discuss future possibilities in AI of creating more inclusive and digital experiences. Our mission is rooted in the belief that technology should be inclusive, breaking down barriers rather than creating them. More resources from O3 will be available in the post-webinar communication. And then you can go ahead to the next slide there, Brian. So here's our agenda for what we'll cover today. Just as a quick overview, there'll be 15 to 20 minutes of presentation, followed by 35 to 40 minutes for the roundtable discussion. I want to note that we're not here just to talk to you, we're here to engage. So please feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A feature of the webinar. This is a fantastic opportunity to get personalized insights from our panel of experts. Whether it's a query about technology, strategies for implementation, or how to foster a culture of inclusivity in your organization, we're here to answer. We can go ahead to the next slide here. And I'm going to turn it over to y'all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this webinar. I would like to start off our introductions quickly. My name is Kristen Waitaki. I am a content creator and accessibility specialist at Tamin. I am also totally blind. I am a teacher, a mother, an author, a mentor, and I have a lot of roles that require accessible technology in my daily life.
Hello, my name is Wally Zielinski. I'm a certified professional in web accessibility from the IAP, and I'm also a senior accessibility engineer at Tamin Inc. Alongside Kristen. I've been in front-end development for over a decade, and I've always been interested in making the world a little bit more of a more inclusive place. So getting into accessibility was one of my favorite parts of my career so far.
Awesome. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be joining from. My name is Brian Crumley. I'm a technology strategist and accessibility specialist at O3 in the Fishtown neighborhood of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My background is in user experience design and front-end development. I use those skills to work with our clients to help them explore and implement technology solutions that ultimately, hopefully, help them meet business goals. In addition, I'm also a certified professional in accessibility core competencies, CPAC, and I work across our organization to advise our team and our clients on the impact of accessibility considerations on their projects, or lack thereof, accessibility on their projects, whichever way we're going there. So, Kristen, handing it back to you.
So, one of my favorite books from my education background is a wonderful little one by Vivian Gussin Paley called You Can't Say You Can't Play. And it basically teaches, it talks about a teacher working with a kindergarten class to foster an environment of zero exclusion. No matter what your reasoning is, like number of people in the game, roles that people play, you can't exclude anyone. It's a book that I think has informed my ethos throughout my career. And I think about it when I think about web accessibility, because inaccessible websites basically are trying to say you can't work or play. And as an adult, or any age, when you have to spend extra time with a website trying to figure out the labeling on fields, trying to navigate buttons that you're not quite sure what they're supposed to do, although you have sort of an idea, trying to get through complex user experiences, finding tabs that are unlabeled or don't really interact the way they're supposed to. All those kinds of things take more time than they do for people without disabilities who are just navigating the web. And when you take that extra time to do a task that you know is supposed to be done quickly or easily, or you have to ask for help navigating an inaccessible website, you also have to kill a lot of the subtle messages that sends. So some of these messages are things like, someone else can do this more quickly or better. Your time is really not that important. Or, oh well, you're wasting your time, you just have to figure out how to make up the time some other way. Or maybe the worst one, you're stupid. When those messages are sent to one person, that one individual has to constantly remind themselves that we are all in this together, that we're all working toward ending exclusion, and that you can also take your business somewhere else, somewhere more accessible. But when that message is sent to 30% of the population, that is a systemic problem. I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing some of your experience there, Kristen. So to go through and I think kind of elaborate a little bit on what Kristen was kind of touching on, I think, we want to go through and talk about what we really mean when we say web accessibility and better understand what that entails. So the internet, for the most part, was designed to work for devices and people of various abilities. That's how it was from the beginning up to now. Web accessibility practices put an emphasis on the accommodations that make web pages usable for those with disabilities, but that's also not the complete story. Many of these considerations that are critical for individuals with disabilities simultaneously actually improve the overall user experience for everybody. I'm going to dig into that part of that during this presentation. But first, let's review a few statistics to help reinforce why accessibility is such an important consideration in our work. So 25% of individuals around the world have some form of disability. In the United States, that translates to roughly 61+ million individuals with some type of disability. And that's a pretty significant number. If we told a client that a website wasn't going to work for a quarter of the people who may try to access it, I can guarantee there'd be some unpleasant conversations happening. So it's not appropriate to go through and do this to individuals with disabilities. We're talking about a very significant group here, and they, should have the equal access that individuals without disability have. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, in that context of 60 million people, 25%, 30%, you haven't really noticed many people with disabilities. And there's a good reason for that. And that's because 75% of disabilities aren't identifiable simply by looking at a person. This can include various conditions such as low vision, color blindness, hearing, cognitive disabilities, and that's just to name a few. And this is significant, particularly because as the population ages, many are going to experience new disabilities over time on top of what we're actually outlining here right now. Now, these are all pretty impactful statistics to keep in mind, but when we focus directly on the business impact, I think the story becomes even more telling. If a website isn't providing accommodations for this group of 61 million individuals with disabilities, there's a very real lost revenue associated with that. And that's because there's $30 billion in annual discretionary income among working age individuals with disabilities. So there's a very real user group here, a very significant user group here. And that user group also has significant spending power when it comes to online products, online services availability. I think it's important that we better understand what we mean when we say disabilities in this context, particularly if we're going to understand why businesses should care more about this. There's 5, roughly common types of disabilities that can be grouped up. Vision, so that would be individuals who are blind, have low vision, or are colorblind. Speech, those individuals who are not able to speak or have difficulty forming words. Hearing disabilities, you could be deaf or hard of hearing. Cognitive, this is a relatively newer area that people are starting to better understand, and that can include individuals with attention deficit disorder, ADD, dyslexia, or epilepsy. And then lastly, motor control, individuals who have limited or no use of their hands or lack fine motor control due to some type of medical condition. Now, a lot of times when we talk about going back to that statistic that we previously showed, individuals with individuals with disabilities you can readily identify, you might think of disabilities such as someone who's missing a limb, someone who is blind, something like that. The full breadth of disabilities or disabling conditions that an individual can experience is much, much deeper than that, though. There are such things as temporary disabilities. Instead of maybe missing a limb, maybe an individual went skiing and injured their arm and it's in a cast. That would go through and affect their ability to go through and use an experience for a period of time, weeks or months or something like that, but they would eventually gain back full ability of that arm. Could also maybe be an ear infection. Somebody went swimming, they got an ear infection, so their hearing is reduced for a period of time until the medicine kind of corrects that. So these are disabilities that come and go over a small period of time, weeks to months or something like that, as opposed to being permanent. But there's also situational disabilities, and these can last, momentary, seconds to a matter of minutes or hours. If you think of a new parent walking down the street, holding her child in one hand, and maybe trying to use her mobile device with one hand. Maybe it's a bright day outside, and she's trying to see the screen in sunny weather. Or let's imagine that you're at a bar and you're trying to convey a message to a bartender, and there's lots of ambient noise, and it's hard to go through and convey what you're saying and for them to hear what you're saying. So I think understanding the full breadth of disabilities helps us better understand that anybody can actually experience some type of a disabling condition at any point and benefit from these accommodations that we would put in place to support individuals that actually have permanent disabilities. So now that we better understand now that we better understand the breadth of disabilities, disabling conditions that individuals can experience, let's dig into what our target is for making a website accessible. There's a set of guidelines called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This is also referred to as the WCAG or the WCAG. These are derived from a set of international standards put together by the W3C Web Accessibility Initiative. And these guidelines aim to establish a kind of shared single standard for making web content more accessible. Here in the US, while the WCAG hasn't necessarily been defined by law as the standard across all businesses, many lawsuits that are being filed today related to accessibility reference the WCAG as the prevailing target for accessibility requirements and remediation. So we'll dig a little deeper into the WCAG here. The WCAG itself is broken down into 4 principles that lay the foundation for anybody to engage with web-based content. These principles are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. A good mnemonic way of helping remember these is with the acronym POUR, P-O-U-R. Inside of perceivable considerations, you're talking about being able to perceive information, interact with user interfaces in some way using some combination of senses. Operable, users should be able to control that experience or elements of that experience using some type of an input device. That could be traditionally a mouse or a keyboard, but it could also be an assistive technology such as voice command or eye tracking. Understandable, the content should be readable. It should appear in predictable and consistent patterns for user without switching up and causing confusion. And then finally, robust. The content should follow best practices that we know of today. And if you follow those best practices, that experience should work across browsers and devices now, and at least be reasonably future-proof for browsers and devices down the road. And within the WCAG, there's 3 levels of success criteria within each principle. There's A, AA, and AAA. A would be considered the bare minimum that you can do for accessibility support. This is the essential stuff. You got to have this there to say you're any level of accessible. AA, this touches on much broader targets, gives you a little bit of a buffer as far as like the things that you're doing, and you really start to get into an area where you're providing the best experience, the best accommodation for individuals, and it also represents the ideal support level in most cases. And then finally, AAA, this is a very strict level of accessibility support. It's probably not appropriate in most instances to try and reach full AAA support. There's some little ones here and there that you can kind of pepper into AA support that aren't too egregious to go through and put in place. But a lot of the considerations inside of AAA actually require significant design, user experience, content considerations that are generally overkill for the vast majority of audiences. And these levels, they build on one another. So for instance, to be considered level A compliant, which is our target, you need to be single A compliant and AA compliant to be considered AA compliant. And as of the time of giving this presentation, WCAG version 2.2 level AA, which was 2.2 was released in fall of last year, I think September, October area. That's kind of become the prevailing standard to target, whereas I think somewhere in the area of 75–80% of federal claims now target that level of success criteria and principles. So I think let's talk about now the impact on business. Now that we understand, I think, some of the foundational stuff of what we're trying to do with this work. So improving your overall customer experience, overlapping best practices that you're probably already putting in place, extending your market reach, enhancing your brand reputation, reducing your legal risk. I mean, if it's up to me and I'm looking at this, this feels like a punch list of basically everything that every business should be trying to do or is aspiring to do with pretty much any initiative that they're putting forward right now in a digital environment. And that all has a positive impact. I'm sorry, accessibility has a positive impact on all of these considerations. So really, if you care about all of these things in the context of your business, accessibility should be a core principle that you're following with the work that you're already doing. And let's take a look at each one of these real quick. So improving your customer experience, or CX. So taking accessibility into account from the start of a project typically results in an experience that not only provides equal accommodation for individuals with disabilities, but also produces a better experience. So we'll take a quick look here at some real-world examples. Got a slide here with 4 photographs on it. Taking a look at the top left side of this is a curb cut. Curb cuts, and then in the photo to the right of it, crosswalks. These are accommodations that came out in conjunction with the Americans with Disability Act back in the early 90s. Now, you might look at a curb cut and say, you know, this is for individuals with disabilities. But in the right photo here, we could see that it's a group of individuals crossing a crosswalk. Well, the first group of individuals is a woman with a child, and that child is on a scooter. That child has a better experience getting out of the crosswalk and up onto the sidewalk because of that curb cut. In the second group, there's a man pushing a stroller. His experience is improved because he's pushing that stroller. He no longer has to lift it up onto the curb. The last group, a man and a woman with a child in their arms. Same deal. We're talking about creating a more equitable experience, whether you have a disability or not. To bring that into a digital context, we'll switch down to the bottom 2 photos on the slide. On the left side is a woman on a crowded train car, and she's looking at her phone. Let's say for the context of this discussion, she is watching a video on that phone. She's not wearing any headphones right now. The train car, maybe it's a quiet car and she doesn't want to make noise, or maybe it's a loud car and she can't actually hear what's coming from her phone. The photo on the bottom right shows an example of what video she might be watching, and that video has captions applied to it. So in the context of her experience right now, she may be fully able-bodied, but she is able to go through and equally enjoy the content of the video through captions, which are an accessibility feature, to make it so that she can go through and continue to watch the video and understand what is happening without actually having to hear the content of it. The second one that we looked at here, an overlap in best practices. So the good thing is that accessibility overlaps with many of the other practices that you and your teams are probably already taking into account. So that can mean writing or building semantic content for your pages, creating more usable experiences that are easy and efficient, designing and developing a mobile-first approach for different browsers, devices, and then SEO best practices, which most companies are investing in at least at some level. Excuse me, sorry. Told you, Wally, I was going to miss one alert in the context of this. So the impact here is because a common misconception is that accessibility is a technical concern, something for the development team to own. But when we're talking about all of these best practices and the impact that accessibility has on them, we actually start to see that it becomes everybody's responsibility to ensure that your digital product is accessible for everybody. And that's especially important when you look at the life cycle of a project. So on the screen here is a chart that we adapted from an IBM report that shows a theoretical project life cycle. It starts on the left with requirements, strategy, and design, and starts to exponentially arc up with development, quality assurance testing, and launch and release. This is going through and demonstrating that if you are waiting until too late in your project lifecycle to go through and start applying accessibility considerations, the time and the cost of doing it increases exponentially. We want to shift the discussion, shift the application of accessibility considerations as far left in the project lifecycle as possible, where these discussions, these decisions are happening in the requirements, in the strategy, in the design. If we start waiting until development, it could cost up to 3 times as much time and money to go through and apply. If we wait until quality assurance, it could be as much as 12 times. If we wait until after launch and release, it could be as much as 30 times. So the earlier that we're able to start having these conversations, the better. Now, that isn't to say that you should not do it simply because you're at the QA stage and it's 12 times more. If you continue to wait, it's going to be 30 times as more. So wherever you're at, I think the point of it is that wherever you're at in the project lifecycle, that is the point to go through and start this, and then be better, be earlier in the future when you start a new project. Extending your market reach.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is the interpreter.
Yes.
I'm just seeing some things in the chat saying that the interpreter is not visible. So I just wanted to draw attention to that quickly.
Oh, okay. Maddie, are you able to take a look at that? Make the both of our interpreters available?
Yes, I thought we had them both pinned right here.
I think we're good now.
Is it fixed?
I see Steph is pinned, so I think we're okay. Okay, I think
Are
we're
we okay now?
Yep.
Okay.
Thumbs up.
I can see everything fine. I was just following what I saw in the chat. So sorry to interrupt.
No worries. No, appreciate it. Thank you for calling that out. Okay. So jumping back in here, extending your market reach. I think the pandemic in particular exposed that equal access to digital experiences. It's not really a novelty, but a critical piece of modern life. As individuals, as businesses, for family and friends, this is just the way it has to be able to be successful and reduce barriers for individuals with disabilities.
Sorry, Brian, I'm going to interrupt one more time because I think we're still getting reports that people can only see Brian.
Oh,
All right, no problem. Let's fix this. 1 second. So I have Stephanie. Let's see.
see Steph. I do see a pin on Steph now. Is that going through and fixing it for folks?
Okay, it looks like that. Great. Sorry about
Can we
that, everyone.
pin
Thank you
both?
for the flexibility.
Can we pin Brian and Stephanie so they can see the speaker and the interpreter at the same time? I think that might be all that needs to happen.
There we go. I'm seeing a pin on both. Is that
I see pins on both. I think we're okay.
Okay.
I'll keep an eye on chat and I'll let you know.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you all. I appreciate that.
Yep. Thank you, Wally. Yeah, so on the extended market reach, I think, we talked about that 61 plus million individual number. Those individuals with disabilities, accessibility support is how you reach this broadest group of individuals and best serve them moving forward. So that's really about extending your market reach. Enhancing your brand reputation. So 9 out of 10 internet users who are blind are actually vocal and advocates for companies whose websites aren't accessible. This doesn't necessarily just mean the individuals with a disability is at risk of being, lost to your business. We're talking about their family, their friends. They're all making purchasing decisions in solidarity with those that require the accessibility support. So not going through and providing support for these individuals has kind of a rippling effect throughout the community and those that are involved with individuals with disabilities as well. So I think knowing this, it should go through and shift the perception that accessibility support, shift it from being perceived that accessibility support is an extra or something we will get to being not only a key feature of what you're doing, but also a competitive advantage against companies that aren't investing in this support now and in the future. The last one, reducing your legal risk. At O3, we always note the legal aspects when it comes to business impacts, but we also typically note it at the end in our discussion with clients, and we're doing it here again in this presentation. And that's certainly not because the threat of litigation isn't possible. It very much is possible. But it also is generally not a strong motivator. If it was a strong motivator, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Businesses would already be doing this out of the gates. So we try to lead off with all of the previous factors and then kind of round out with the reduced legal risk. And while not defined by law evenly across industries in the US, there are many lawsuits being filed for lack of accessibility consideration in digital products. Numbers are a little bit up and down, but I think in 2023 alone, it falls somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 federal lawsuits were filed during that calendar year, specifically for lack of accessibility in digital products. And there's generally an understanding around the Americans with Disability Act that businesses and their websites should be regarded as public accommodations and they should be accessible. So while not crystal clear like other laws, I think the winds are pointing it in a certain direction. So there's no time like the present to go through and get aligned on this. Also, being sued for lack of accessibility is really the ultimate expense. I think hearkening back to that chart that we looked at, 30 times, if you start remediating after release or launch and everything, if you wait until you actually have litigation brought against you for accessibility support, not only do you have the cost of going through and actually cost and time of remediating the accessibility issues, you now also have lawyer fees, settlement costs, all of that on top of everything, and you're still accountable for doing what you should have been applying, from the get-go. So there's really no reason to wait, no reason to deprioritize. This is something that any company could go through and start rolling out now and start building a more equitable experience over time. Awesome. Well, thank you for allowing us to go through and kind of lay a foundation around accessibility with the slide deck, and apologies that our ASL, our pinning here didn't quite line up. We will make this presentation available as a PDF in the aftermath of the talk. If you did happen to miss anything, there will also be a recording available. But I think we can now switch over to a roundtable discussion and open the floor for any questions or comments.
That sounds great. I will start with a couple of questions just to get us warmed up here. First one is for Wally. In your experience, how has the perspective of inclusion in the digital space shifted with the advent of AI?
Sorry, I'm gonna take that in 1 second. Can we just repin
Yeah,
the
read an
new
interpreter.
interpreter? Or okay, and maybe let's just get rid of the screen share if possible. I think that might help.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me turn that off for a second. There we go. Is everybody good?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
I hope that is better. Okay.
Awesome. Okay.
Can you ask
I'll
that
repeat the
question one more
question.
time?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Excellent. In your experience, Wally, how has the perspective of inclusion in the digital space shifted with the advent of AI?
Yeah, I mean, the conversations are happening. People are very eager to see what AI can do for them, and that includes everything from content creation to content editing to, how maybe I can use this to make my website more accessible. So people are asking about how to maybe leverage automated or AI to provide things like generate some sample alt text or captions for an image. And so it's shifting the perspective to like, what can we use this for, and how can we make things like this? How can we make things more direct or like easier? And sometimes that's a good thing. It can be nice when there's a tool that's available that helps you to create like a starting point. Maybe it's great if you can like type into ChatGPT and get some sample alt text for an image. That might be a good place to start if you never have written alt text before. But of course, it also comes with that double-edged sword of, if you rely on this too heavily, we know that AI has biases. We know that AI is not perfect. And so you can end up with alt text that is not optimal because you've relied too heavily on this tool. So yeah. Brian, do you have thoughts on that as well?
I think that you hit the nail on the head with it, Wally. Is it's great, all the innovation that is coming out of AI right now, and we're certainly at O3, we're working with a lot of it. But it's a technology right now that is partially at least built on I think a specific type of individual and specific data sets that are associated or not associated necessarily with a more diverse group, whether that's individuals of color or individuals with disability or whatever. So I think while there's a lot of power in what AI can go through and do, I think while you kind of hit the nail on the head with, it's great to go through and provide additional support, but we should also be mindful of, where its internal biases might lie, and, recognize that and kind of adapt to it as we're all starting to kind of dip our toe in this and get better acquainted with it and use it more in our day-to-day work.
Thank you. Before we go further, are we still having the same issues with interpreters and seeing all the speakers?
I think the view is a little bit different in YouTube versus the stream actually in Zoom itself. So there's a little bit of different views being seen, but I think right now it's working from what I've seen. So just let us know and we can be flexible here.
I think it's working for us because we are panelists, but guests are not able to see everyone at the same time. So there's no interpreters being shown.
Yeah, we're still getting messages from the guests.
I don't know if there's a way to set that, like
Everyone
setting.
is everyone is pinned. It's just a matter of okay, Vicky is on now. Great. I think we can move forward. It's just a matter of seeing faces. So we'll just keep the interpreter pinned to make sure that that's the primary screen.
Okay. As usual, just let us know in the chat if there's anything funky happening. And also send us your questions.
Well, I have a question for both of you. Is there how do you balance automated AI assessments and manual evaluations in ensuring a really comprehensive accessibility for web content?
Yeah, I can start with that. So you have to do both for sure. I try to use the automated tools in the early stages so that I can catch sort of the low-hanging fruit. But you can't only rely on the automated tools. They don't find everything. They find like 30 to 50% of all the issues that are present on a page. So it's a good way to kind of get like a sense for what some of the basic things that might still be missing are. But you have to go through as well with a screen reader or doing some keyboard testing to make sure you're catching all the other aspects of issues that might not be accounted for by those automated tools. Brian, how much time do you think you spend if you're doing like auditing, like between both automated and manual?
We're actually about to embark on a couple of new audits starting next week, and I think right now we have it slated to probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30 hours, like 30 hours of work between automated and manual testing. We kind of follow the same approach that Wally had outlined there, where when we're going through and performing an audit, we typically start with an automated audit. There's a ton of different tools that are out there. Chrome does have its own automated accessibility checker inside of it in the inspector. And it does give kind of a 10,000-foot view of like what is available to you, but it's really the ones that are the most impactful from an SEO standpoint. I think, Wally, you had mentioned that automated tools typically catch somewhere between like 30 and 50% of what can actually be possible defects. I think the way that Lighthouse works right now, it's closer to probably like 15 to 20% because it's like the overlap between accessibility and SEO. If you use tools like Stark or Deque or WebAIM or something like that, you do get into that 30 to 50% area. We typically use one of those tools to go through and get a more comprehensive idea about where things are at. But then, yeah, I think a critical part of it and something that we do talk regularly about with clients is automated isn't enough. Like, yes, there you can get these Boolean, like, are you or aren't you reports of around like accessibility features, but you don't truly start to understand the accessibility experience until you actually manually test, with a screen reader, with your own navigation, with your own kind of knowledge of the WCAG, because there's so much nuance to it. There's so many gaps in what can be or can't be possible. And then I think also how to put this? The WCAG is about compliance. The WCAG is about, are you putting these pieces in place to make your experience as accessible as possible? But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily optimized for individuals. And I think that that's the second half of it is, how do you move beyond simply checking the boxes and being able to say that you're compliant to delivering a more optimal experience for everybody? And that takes manually going through and testing things. So that I think that's the dividing line. That's the difference maker right there.
Okay. Can someone give examples of use of AI in the different stages of SDLC?
Yeah, so software development lifecycle is SDLC,
Mhm.
just to set that stage. So you can use AI in many applications, obviously, and I'll try to be specific here. So one way that people use AI is to have things like Microsoft's Copilot, which is a sort of AI generating or an AI that helps generate code. So you have it in your code editor, and it will suggest, almost like when you're typing an email, it'll auto-complete certain parts of your code so that based on what it assumes you're trying to do, it will write code for you essentially. Or you could type in a prompt and say, hey, I need a component that has a toggle or is a button and opens a modal or whatever, and it'll like try and create code for you that will work in your repository. Now, obviously, those tools. Well, okay. I want to talk about all the different sides of this, which is that these are useful in sense of they get you further faster, but they also come with all the same biases, and they're trained on a certain subset of code of data that can have accessibility problems in them inherently. And so when you use those tools, you might end up accidentally integrating that type of thing in your code. And so you can also use those tools to ask like things like ChatGPT or Copilot to say like, hey, I have this code, it's not accessible. Can you help me figure out why? Like, hey, I have this modal, but it's not trapping focus correctly. And it will help give you maybe a sense for like, hey, maybe you need to add a focus trap. You need to make sure that when someone presses tab on the last element, they get brought back to the first element of this thing. And it'll give you a code sample of what that might look like.
Mhm.
You could also do, like I said, with alt text, you could ask AI to generate alt text for you. There's a lot of different ways that AI could be involved in that software development lifecycle to give you starting points, give you feedback on why something that you're writing might not be as accessible as it could be. But again, it all comes with the same sort of pitfalls and traps that any AI tool has. So it's never 100%. I hope that helps give a little bit more specifics. I know that DQ, I think, is developing a AI that is specifically like a chatbot that is specifically engineered for answering accessibility related questions, trained on all of their training data. So that'll be interesting to see in the future. I don't know if they have a release date for it. They just announced it at AxCon this year.
That's really cool. One attendee says they have seen problems in the flow of data in PDFs, and can you talk about why that might happen?
I did quickly just want to jump in here too. If anybody is having issues with the views or the setup of the format and you'd like to see both, just head on over to our YouTube page. And that's live streaming right now and is in that grid format. Sorry to interrupt, Kristen.
No, not a problem.
Thanks, Maddie.
Okay, so the attendee says they've seen problems in the flow of data in PDFs and wondered if we could talk about that.
Yeah, PDF remediation is a thing. It's not something that I do on a daily basis. So I don't know if Kristen or Brian want to jump in more here, but there's a whole other aspect of accessibility that's not even web, but specifically to document accessibility. And there's a whole process by which you have to, by which will help to make documents like PDFs accessible to the screen reader. And you have to kind of go through from what I know and from what my colleagues have told me and showed me is you end up having to like tag the PDF, which uses different software like Adobe Acrobat to sort of provide semantic meaning and provide a reading order for the PDF and to sort of bake in all of the things that make that content readable into the document. It doesn't always come in by default. So if you're just working in Illustrator or you're converting a Word doc to PDF, that reading order and those semantic things are going to be like sometimes wrong, often wrong when they just get exported by default, because a lot of these programs don't like account for that type of thing always out of the box 100% of the time. Is that kind of right?
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah, I mean, PDF accessibility is its own thing, and we'll probably need to set up a separate webinar to address that, honestly. But um, it's really important to note that just because your document in another format, such as Google Docs or Microsoft Word, is accessible, doesn't mean that it always translates into PDF. So it's always important to check the PDF itself and to make sure that it's readable and fully tagged. So the Adobe can adjust your settings as well, or maybe the other viewer that you're using for your PDF documents, like Chrome or um, other programs. But it's always good to check the actual PDF to make sure that it's fully accessible.
Yeah, I'd say even in the context of, what we'll be handing out in the aftermath of this this discussion, PDF accessibility, document accessibility is a completely different animal on top of even the WCAG specs that we talked about during the talk. And it brings with it a completely unique set of challenges as well. Different way that you go through and handle going through and actually applying everything. So, reading order, tagging of content, setting up alt text for visual assets inside of there. All of that is a slightly different animal, a slightly different
Tables.
doing it. Yeah, tables. Don't even get me started on tables. Tables are just unwieldy inside of PDFs, but this is all kind of I think the satellites that support like your main digital product. I think we gave this presentation in the context of your website, but your website is made up of PDFs and videos and podcasts and all of these other more rich media formats that also need to be accessible when someone is interacting with them. And it's you can find these types of issues as a part of an audit process, but the remediation process is very different than a web-based remediation process. So it all plays into it. Also, the way that you create the PDF can affect just how much control you have to go through and actually apply accessibility to it. If you some software goes through and actually creates images out of text instead of actually making it editable text. That's basically 100% useless. You need to be able to go through and actually have editable text in the PDF to be able to go through and create that outline, define the hierarchy of the PDF itself, and define the unique areas of the PDF in conjunction with actually delivering it.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of comments about PDFs, so clearly
Yeah.
this is our next topic. for sure.
Seriously. I feel like we could talk for a week about PDF accessibility and still not cover all of the nuance of it.
Yeah. Any other questions? We have a little more time.
Yeah, there's a couple more in the chat. Maybe I could take this one.
Yeah.
Can you talk about this is from an anonymous attendee? Can you talk about the inherent risks of overly depending on AI for web accessibility tasks and strategic approaches to counteract these challenges? So like I said before, there are challenges with AI in terms of every data set that AI gets trained on has biases. All AI content all training data that is being used to train AI is written by people, and people are flawed, and people have biases, and so there are times when we can inadvertently introduce that same bias. We can reinforce the same problems by creating AI that makes more stuff that we do, but our world is not accessible. Or it's not as accessible as it could be. So it'll end up creating it'll exacerbate some of those problems. So how do you counteract those challenges? I think having awareness is the biggest thing. And I know that's kind of vague and sort of wishy-washy, but if you are aware of those problems, if you're aware of the ways in which the world is already sort of not super accessible to people, and that can creep into AI learning models, and you take everything that the AI gives you with a grain of salt, you can sort of start to understand which parts of things you should take and which parts you should maybe leave in the ChatGPT window.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for instance, if AI is generating an image description and it can go either way, it can either be super, super unhelpful, like this photo may have people in it, or it can go on and wax poetic in the AI sense of, what these people are doing. And some of the AI descriptions are wonderful, but I think just keeping in mind, making sure it's brief enough, but helpful enough at the same time. It doesn't go on and on off on a tangent, that it answers the most pressing questions about why the photo is there in a larger context. And I think that's true of almost any use of AI. So
Yeah, I think even, inside the context of accessibility and AI and outside the context of it, I think the biggest thing is to look at AI as it's not a replacement for anything that you're doing right now, at least as it exists in its current state. It's there to help augment it. If I think, Wally, you touched on using Copilot to go through and create code examples. Just because it spits something out doesn't mean that it's accurate. If you use it to generate content, just because it spits something out for you that sounds good, doesn't mean that it's accessible. It doesn't mean that it stays on topic, as Kristen mentioned. We use AI across all kinds of steps of the software development lifecycle to help various aspects of what we're doing, to help SEO, to help development, to help accessibility. But it is a ask and verify tool, not a ask and kind of wash your hands of accountability tool. We write test plans with AI, but we still need to go in and check each step ourselves. We have it write code samples, but we still need to run them through validators to make sure that there's nothing kind of like off inside of it. So, it's incredibly powerful, and you should absolutely start to leverage it in your day-to-day workflow. But by leveraging it, you should be keeping yourself accountable for what the results that come out of it are, and recognizing, to Wally's point, it is a flawed technology. It is built on a biased data set. So it's on you as the individual using AI to leverage it in a responsible way. And if you do, it's incredibly powerful, and you'll benefit from it. But accountability for yourself and for what you're taking from it is paramount.
Yeah, I'm just trying to pop open the chat again. Sorry.
I think Kevin Erickson, you touched on a good part of it is, if you do have, if you are leveraging AI, you do have subject matter experts that you can rely on for whatever you're using AI for. That can certainly help. Just to make sure that, if you understand it at a cursory level and you have someone that you can kind of bounce the idea off of to make sure it's accurate, that's absolutely a good approach to it as well.
Thank you. Do either of you have any kind of closing thoughts, or maybe the unasked question that you want to answer?
I would say on my side, I mean, I think we talked about, a lot of, AI is good, but be cautious kind of stuff. I don't want it to sound like, AI has a really bright future. I think that it needs to evolve. It's just like many technologies, many innovations in the past. It's based off of flawed data, and it's set up to go through and basically cater to a more vanilla audience, I guess, as it were. It is not an incredibly diverse pool of data that any AI is really working from right now, but it will get there. But there are some companies, particularly as it relates to accessibility, that are doing incredible stuff right now to go through and actually improve the experiences for individuals. They are taking into account the effect of AI on individuals with disabilities and making that a core part of the work that they're doing with AI. There's people that are doing work with image identification, object identification, with connecting individuals that are, let's say, sighted and non-sighted individuals to use AI to go through and help as you are navigating open space. It's all very, ground level type stuff, but I think it just points to how great it can be if it's done responsibly from this point forward. So while we urge caution and urge, making sure that you are the one being accountable for what your AI is putting out, there's a lot of great stuff happening that, I think people in the space should be excited about, to see how it can go through and actually improve the lives of various individuals.
Yeah, I
any
think-
thoughts?
Yeah. There's so much to sort of consider. I hope that people take away that, there, like Brian said, there's a lot of great applications for AI, and that I hope that as you are engaging with those tools, as you start to learn more about accessibility and inclusion and are kind of bringing that sense of awareness to what you're doing, you'll be able to see some of those pitfalls ahead of you as you encounter them, and be able to avoid some of them. And hopefully that brings us to a world in which there is more accessibility, more inclusion. That's what we're all here for.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my wish for the world. How about you, Kristen? Final thoughts?
I would say it's so true that and Kevin Erickson saying in the chat, personas with disabilities, to have personas with a diverse experience set, diverse use constraints, and that's kind of considered normal or the default, so that technology can work for everyone who needs it and everyone who can avail themselves of it. That's my grand wish for the world, for sure.
Amazing. And I'm just going to echo again what Maddie said in the chat. Thanks to everyone who let us know about issues with the Zoom. Definitely learning some things for next time, and appreciate everyone's flexibility.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for the feedback and letting us know.
Amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for the questions. If there are any additional questions that we didn't get to, or if there's any questions that pop up in the aftermath of everything, absolutely feel free to reach out. Any of us are happy to go through and continue to dig into this. We will also go through and share the talk from this. We'll share the recording from this. So if anything happens to pop up once you give it a second look, we'd love to talk to you about what you're doing, what your challenges are, how you're using AI, or if you have questions about how AI can be used. We're here to go through and support that, and would love to collaborate with folks. So please keep us posted.
Yeah, we'll be sending out emails with all the information from this webinar, including the PDF and a recording. And you can reach us at o3world.com and tammaninc.com.
That's TAMMAN.
INC, yes, lots of M's and N's there. So.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Well,